I've noted many times in the past as it concerns Apple TV that out of the mix of streaming services available today, and there are quite a lot that are vying for your money, they are one of the more universally competent, I think, in terms of content delivery. Even though they're usually underrepresented in regards to people's attention. I don't hear often people, at least in my circle, speaking about Apple TV. I usually hear about like HBO Max or Disney Plus or some of the other more mainstream ones. But Apple TV, from not only the wealth of content I've covered from them, as well as the projects I've at this point been exposed to, I get a good impression for their work. And I did with Dear Edward, a very sentimental show, quite a capable drama in my opinion. Very sentimental, and also has a very touching story about a kid, a very realistic one I'm sure for many people. If someone... Yeah, well, actually, many people can relate to this, even speaking irrespective of the specific focus of a kid being left, I believe, an orphan amid his parents both dying in a plane crash that he was on and he survived. It's a very sentimental story, not only for the individual and how perhaps we might look at a kid in that situation, even in the real world, or just somebody that you know. You're someone that's dealt with a death in your life, and death in itself it's a mainstay, but it's so sad and oftentimes unexpected that processing life going forward can be quite challenging. But to see a show not only embrace that type of realism, but also to strengthen this notion of, it takes a community in part, especially since this plane crash involved a lot of lives, not just in people who directly were made a casualty of the incident, but also people who were affected by those losses from people in their circles who unfortunately are no longer there. I felt the staging of the series in part of all these different types of stories. I believe it's from what I remember, I think it's a 10-episode series. I might have that wrong in terms of the specific number, but it is I don't even remember if it's a limited series or not, but it's a series. So there's time to explore these characters, even though Edward is the character of this 12-year-old kid of principal focus. There's time for the story to give you a good study of all the different characters that are epicentered around this plane crash. And the way the story is structured in regards to, well, I'm assuming, this is just my presumption, that the stories are separate but connected through that plane crash thread, that these characters all come into each other's circle for the counseling realm. That was made clear, at least in one image in the first trailer. I thought it was quite good in terms of, again, in the idea, in the delivery, the emotional side. I felt this piece will probably connect with a lot of people. You don't even necessarily have to have the direct connection to, I lost somebody from, death in a very unexpected way, or a tragedy like a plane crash. You can still sympathize, because we're human beings, we're compassionate, at least most of us are. I don't know how existent those types of feelings and empathy are in the 2023 year coming off of the last couple, but generally speaking, most people still know how to feel. No disrespect, but not all of us have a hard heart. Many of us don't. So a series like this, I'm sure, will touch a lot of people in its delivery, and will help us look outside of ourselves, perhaps other people who have dealt with that type of tragedy, and maybe we can take the story of Dear Edward and birth that into real life. I wouldn't be surprised if for people that's sort of a destination of the series, that the lessons you take from it are in part invaluable. Let's go ahead and take a look at this featurette. For me on this channel, if you haven't been exposed to my work before, I like to get the deepest perspective of entertainment possible, not only just consulting maybe a trailer or a teaser or something that's unveiled in terms of getting a first impression of the movie, but I like to dig deeper. I like to understand the heart of the series and the mindsets and the passion of the creators behind the show or film, whatever the subject matter happens to be. And I feel that with Apple TV, as well as generally with many companies, the behind-the-scenes featurettes offer a great window into that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at for Dear Edward, to get a better perspective of the show as a whole. But on a general impression, again, like I said, I'm impressed on a first introduction with it. It looks like a very well done show. And again, with the Apple TV branding, I expect a high quality. All right, here we go.
Dear Edward is a story that is born out of this tragic circumstance.
I got you. Oh, I didn't realize it was based on a story. That's... No wonder it's sentimental.
There's a deadly plane crash.
And Apple's done plenty in the way of book adaptations.
Is a 12-year-old child named Edward, who is my character's nephew.
What happened isn't fair, Edward. I know I will never replace your mom.
Lacey wanted to have a child. It's been a struggle that's affected her marriage, her self-esteem, everything. And then suddenly, out of this
very dense piece,
there's a boy who drops into her lap.
And then her life starts to change and all this really beautiful stuff happens.
The airline will pay for a psychologist. I think it could be a good
So the
idea.
story is more so centered to both characters, even though again it can expand to others.
Who have experienced this loss.
Did you say a 12-year-old boy named Edward? Is it the Edward? Are you the aunt?
Yeah, that's me. I guess I'm the aunt.
How's he doing?
How are you doing?
As disparate as the experiences are, this point of grief connects lives that would never have known each other.
So like I said, there's a wide scope to the series, but the clear distinctive thread of community,
with the death of her husband,
especially building community after a tragedy,
none of it is real.
He thought that he was
I think it's quite good.
around financially for you guys. I know he was working on that.
Because the inciting incident of the show is so tragic, people might think that it's going to be depressing, but really it is about watching people be resilient.
It's a survivor story.
They find love, they find connection. It reminds you of just how surprising life can be.
You can come back from anything if you have enough love and support around you.
He seems like a sweet kid.
In the face of grief,
There's a
the
lot of
only
child
way
actors
that
that kind
we
of go down
go
that
on
path.
is
Maybe he's the new Jacob Tremblay. Looks good. Again, like I said, the featurettes give you a great window, and it's this. Not having read the book, I didn't even know it was based on a book. Apple TV, like I've said, has done plenty of pictures that have followed that line as well. And from at least the one I've seen in, well, not in full, I'm still working my way through it, but Foundation's been pretty good. Very different show, of course. That's more sci-fi, fantasy in scope than this is. But I think that Dear Edward is good on delivery. Again, it's based more so on a drama of connecting people's stories amid a tragedy, and that tragedy in itself is foundational, right? It's not necessarily, a journey of grief for the entire duration. That's just the general baseline of a story. It has to be rooted somewhere. But it's that connection that I think is going to elevate the series to, in time, a more happy mood. Even if, again, the tragedy still exists and the results in the tragedy are still felt in lingering emotions and loss, it's a story that I imagine will touch a lot of people in the positive direction. Not even just maybe on lessons that we glean, but just on a general empathy and getting in touch with these characters. They're going to seem quite real. I get that impression from the series. I think it's a great delivery. Many of my suspicions, it seems, were supported in part of how the story is staged, the wide scope of the different characters. I did not realize that the aunt is in a greater focus here, and it's not just more so based on Dear Edward, or, the Edward character, but the two characters are intertwined through her wanting to assume in her own right a mother role, and that's sort of, while we might not necessarily go for those types of circumstances, you never know if a card's life might deal at you. And so that's her newfound responsibility. And the story seems to be, at least on my impression, giving equal focus, especially on those two characters, and they seem to be at the front seat in role prominence. I like it. Again, like I've said, Apple TV has produced a lot of work at this point that my expectations are pretty high regarding their work. And Dear Edward fits that bar. Maybe you have a similar impression, maybe you have a different impression. I'd love to hear if you wish to disclose your opinion down below, what your stance is on the series. It's going to debut very soon. I forget the exact release date. I think they mentioned it in the trailer. It debuts February 3rd, so it's coming in a couple days from now. It looks good, though. I'm definitely willing to check it out, as I've been many Apple TV productions, but Dear Edward has a real enticing sentimentality to it that I think is going to touch a lot of people, including myself. It seems like a journey that just lures us in, and we all wish to take it. Even if, again, there's many events of tragedy in the story, and there's that somber mood in part, I think it's a series that will deeply resonate and connect with us, and give us, again, that greater sense of humanity for the world around us as well, in terms of our people that have dealt with very similar stories, or stories like this directly. I think it's going to touch a lot of people. That's what content, at least in some parts, especially when you're talking about dramas, should do. And Apple TV has done that plenty of times, and Dear Edward, to me, appears to be no exception to that. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.